Wharton, you are an incompetent, useless piece of trash, and there is not a single damn reason for you to take over the company from Mr. Jusko," Uncle Carlos yelled, slamming both hands down on the long oak dining table, right in the middle of the Thanksgiving dinner. I leisurely folded the linen napkin, smoothed out the wrinkles on the table, and looked up straight into his eyes. Uncle Carlos had no idea that the chairman's seat he had coveted for the past 7 years had actually been sitting safely in the coat pocket of a garbage man for a very long time. For the past 7 years, the lives of myself and this family had passed in a silence full of contempt, until today finally arrived. The pungent, sour stench of fermenting household waste, the smell of industrial cleaning chemicals, and rusty metal had clung to every crevice of my fingernails. I am Wharton, 29 years old. My official title on paper is the Solid Waste Recycling Line Operating Engineer at the Detroit City Transfer Station. But to this extended family, I am just a garbage man. My job has never been a permitted topic at family gatherings. The word engineer in my title was always ignored by Uncle Carlos, Aunt Patricia, or the other cousins. Every time I walked into a gathering, Aunt Patricia would discreetly take a half step back, her hand nervously fingering a bottle of room spray. No one was keen on acknowledging a blood tie with me if we happened to bump into each other on the street, especially when I was wearing my muddy, high-visibility orange work uniform, except for my grandfather. Mr. Jusko was the founder of the outdoor plastic furniture manufacturing company. In stark contrast to the coldness from the rest of the family, he frequently called me to ask about my work. 7 years ago, when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy due to skyrocketing prices of virgin raw materials, I was the one who brought him the technological blueprint and a cheap supply of recycled plastic pellets from the city's plant. The eco-friendly product line born from that idea saved the company, but Uncle Carlos, in his capacity as the sales director, wiped my name off every record, claimed the credit for himself, and launched himself onto the pedestal of power. 3 months ago, Uncle Carlos's silent contempt officially turned into a direct attack. It was a noisy Tuesday morning at the waste plant. I was standing on the sorting conveyor inspection platform when a luxurious black car drove straight into the front yard, ignoring the no parking sign. Uncle Carlos stepped out. He was wearing a custom-tailored gray suit, carefully stepping around the oil-slicked puddles. Walking beside him was the executive director of the city transfer station, my direct manager. I took off my gloves and walked down the iron stairs. Uncle Carlos looked me up and down, taking a handkerchief from his breast pocket to cover his nose. "Still digging through trash, Wharton," Uncle Carlos said in a condescending tone, loud enough for the nearby workers to hear. "I thought you had given up and moved to another state by now." I didn't answer, only looked over at my manager. He avoided my gaze. "I came here to announce some good news," Uncle Carlos smiled smugly. "The company will not be renewing the contract to purchase recycled materials from this dump next quarter. Did you think I didn't know that old man Jusko was secretly favoring this cheap workplace of yours? He stuffed money into your pockets under the guise of environmental protection. But I'm not stupid. I've found a partner supplying refined industrial plastic over in Ohio. Cleaner, more professional, and most importantly, it doesn't reek like you do." Uncle Carlos threw a stack of papers onto the lid of a scrap bin. He forced my manager to sign the premature termination agreement, while loudly demanding that the plant cut my working hours since their biggest source of revenue was lost. He wanted to cut off my livelihood right where I worked. He wanted me to permanently withdraw from this family by suffocating my income. Uncle Carlos had actively kicked me down into the mud, ruthlessly and calculatedly. But Uncle Carlos didn't know one thing. The contract he had just torn up wasn't merely a simple purchase agreement. When my grandfather found out his illness was worsening, he anticipated Uncle Carlos's malice. He secretly authorized me to be the sole name on all the core legal agreements binding the company to the city of Detroit. I began collecting internal data. I realized that Uncle Carlos didn't just want to change suppliers. For the past 6 months, he had secretly directed the factory to mix an additional 30% of low-quality scrap plastic into the extrusion process to pocket the difference, hoarding cash to buy out the shares of the Ohio partners. He was gutting my grandfather's very legacy. Everything almost came to an end on a rainy October afternoon. I was secretly standing in the foundry's storage warehouse, holding a stack of quality control records, proving that the impurity ratio in the plastic had exceeded the safety threshold. The warehouse door suddenly rolled up. Tyler, Uncle Carlos's right-hand assistant, walked in. The sound of his leather shoe soles pounded against the cement floor. he saw me. His eyes swept from my grease-stained work uniform down to the confidential stamped documents in my hands. A freezing silence stretched out. What the hell is a junkyard worker doing with the executive board's material quality reports? Tyler narrowed his eyes, stepping closer. My heart leaped into my throat. I let my arms hang loose. The stack of files slipped from my fingers, falling straight into the filthy puddle inside the scrap bin right at my feet. I dropped my truck keys, I grumbled, pretending to reach into the scrap bin and stir it vigorously, submerging the files deep at the bottom so the black sludge completely hid the pages. Tyler sneered. He stepped forward, looking down at the pitch-black water. I held my breath. My chest tightened. If Tyler lingered for just 2 more seconds, if he pulled out his phone and shined the flashlight straight down to the bottom of the bin, if he had keen enough eyes to see the corner of the waterproof plastic folder peeking out from under the mud, everything would be over. The entire 7-year plan my grandfather and I had built would shatter right here. But Tyler just snorted, stepping back for fear of dirtying his shoes. Get out of here before I call security to throw you out. The night before the Thanksgiving dinner, I locked myself in the bathroom of my cramped apartment. I used a stiff brush to scrub my hands with industrial soap. I scrubbed until my skin was red and bleeding, but that pungent, sour smell still lingered somewhere. I leaned both hands on the edge of the sink, staring straight into the mirror. My face was gaunt, my eyes ringed with dark circles from long night shifts and days of sneaking around investigating. I asked myself what the hell I was doing. Why did I have to step into the toxic mess of this family? I walked out to the living room. My eyes caught on a small object sitting on the coffee table. It was a hexagonal coaster, pressed from dozens of blue and white plastic bottle caps. It was crude and distorted. It was the first item I had ever successfully pressed in my grandfather's garage when I was 10. That day he placed his rough hand on my shoulder, smiled kindly, and told me that whether something is trash or treasure all depends on the hands that mold it. I picked up the coaster. Its surface was bumpy and coarse. I wasn't fighting for a chair in the boardroom. I was fighting to protect the foundation that the two of us had built. I took a deep breath. The doubt vanished. The Thanksgiving dinner at the mansion took place with its usual ostentation. The dining table was covered with a pristine white linen cloth. When the turkey was brought out, my grandfather gently tapped his knife against his water glass. The room fell into silence. He breathed heavily, glanced over everyone, and then announced in a hoarse voice that starting next Monday morning, the position of CEO would officially be handed over to me. The air froze solid, then chaos erupted. Uncle Carlos yelled, kicking his upholstered chair backward. "Are you losing your mind, Dad? A guy who works at a garbage dump. What the hell has this bastard ever done besides smelling like a sewer every time he walks into the house?" I slowly placed my napkin down on the table. I looked straight at Uncle Carlos. I asked him why the elasticity rate of the outdoor bench batch shipped last month had dropped by 12%, resulting in a slew of returned orders. I reached into my bag, pulled out an unshaped block of raw plastic, and slammed it down in the middle of the table. I exposed his unauthorized directive to the factory to mix in an additional 30% of poorly processed scrap plastic to embezzle company funds. Uncle Carlos stood frozen for a beat. Silence engulfed the dining table. Then he unexpectedly burst out laughing, a dry, calculating laugh. He wasn't panicking like I thought he would. He smoothed the lapels of his suit and stood up straight. "You think these cheap parlor tricks scare me, Wharton?" Uncle Carlos growled. "So what if you sneaked around collecting quality reports? Did you think I didn't know you were behind that garbage supply from the city of Detroit? I saw through your and this senile old man's scheme a long time ago." Uncle Carlos took a step forward, planting both hands on the table. "You think I'm destroying the company. I'm saving it from your control. I've already quietly negotiated a deal with the partner in Ohio. The entire supply of refined plastic pellets has been locked in at a set price. The first shipment is on its way here right now. This company doesn't need a single gram of your trash anymore. Your contract with the city is nothing but a piece of scrap paper, you idiot." I sat quietly, listening to him vent all his arrogance. Uncle Carlos was indeed very smart. He had anticipated my move and prepared a perfect escape route. If the Ohio contract was successful, all the evidence I had today would be completely invalidated. I tapped my finger lightly on the table. 1 beat, 2 beats. "You're right, Uncle Carlos," I said in a calm voice. "You're not stupid. You were very smart to find a backup supplier in Ohio, but you forgot one very small detail when you went behind our backs to deal with them." I unzipped my duffel bag, pulled out a thick file folder, and tossed it onto the table. You forgot to carefully reread the company's credit loan agreement. I pushed the stack of documents toward Tyler, who was standing nearby. Tyler, open page 14. Read the credit guarantee clause out loud for your boss to hear. Tyler hesitated for a second before shakily opening the document. His eyes quickly scanned the bold text. Tyler's voice cracked. The company's $20 million line of credit is collateralized by the exclusivity of the recycled materials supply from the city of Detroit. The sole guarantor with the authority to maintain this credit limit is— Tyler gulped. He looked up at me. Is Wharton, Tyler muttered. In other words, I stood up, looking directly at Uncle Carlos. The partner company in Ohio conducted an independent financial due diligence check last Wednesday morning. They discovered that if you cut ties with the city of Detroit, the company's entire credit limit would be immediately frozen by the bank. You wouldn't have the cash to pay them. They officially canceled their memorandum of understanding with you exactly 24 hours ago. Uncle Carlos froze. The hands he had planted on the table slipped an inch. Impossible, Uncle Carlos hissed. They sent me a confirmation email on Tuesday. Those papers are fake. Then why don't you try calling their sales director and see? I jutted my chin toward the phone in his pocket. Uncle Carlos frantically reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, but Tyler had already taken a step back. The loyal assistant slammed the file folder shut on the table. The sharp sound echoed, cutting off any last shred of hope. Tyler looked at Uncle Carlos, shook his head, and took another step back, detaching himself from the collapse. He realized that the powerful man he had always followed had actually been backed into a dead end without even knowing it. "Boss," Tyler said quietly, his voice filled with resignation. "The contract is canceled. We're really done for." Absolute silence engulfed the room. Uncle Carlos let his arms fall to his sides. All of his smartest, calculated counterattacks had been completely dismantled by a financial barrier that my grandfather and I had set up years ago. He turned on his heel and took long strides out of the dining room, leaving an awkward silence behind him. 6 months later, the CEO's office is located on the top floor of a glass building in the center of the city. From here, you can see the rushing streams of traffic below. I have gradually gotten used to wearing suits, although sometimes I still wear my steel-toed work boots to the office. Uncle Carlos has left, and the company's supply chain has been strictly tightened by me. I open the drawer of my desk, take out the hexagonal coaster made from melted plastic bottle caps, and place it in the most prominent spot next to my computer monitor. Occasionally, in the late afternoons, my grandfather still calls me. We don't talk much about financial reports. He usually asks me if that small piece of plastic is still on the desk, and I always reply that it is still there, reminding me to keep my hands steady, no matter how muddy and soiled its starting point might have been.